President Trump has plenty of things to talk about during his upcoming State of the Union address to Congress. But Ross Eisenberg hopes he makes some time to talk about the U.S. plastics industry. Hi, I'm Norbert Sparrow, editor of Plastics Today, and I'm here with Ross, president of America's Plastic Makers and a leading voice for plastics advocacy within the American Chemistry Council. He would like to see the president outline some policy priorities for the U.S. plastics industry, which incidentally supports over $1 trillion in economic output and more than 5 million jobs domestically. Ross, how are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So let's start with this. My understanding is that you have three talking points you would like the president to address. And let's begin with the passage of the Recycling Technology Innovation Act. Tell us what's at stake here.
Yeah, and actually, so in the past week, that one talking point has turned into two. So we actually have two bills that we'd like to see him talk about. But the first one is that Recycling Technology Innovation Act, and this all gets to modernizing recycling, both mechanical and advanced recycling. One of the challenges that recyclers, and in particular chemical or advanced recyclers, have had is an inability to have regulatory certainty to know how it's going to be regulated, how that permit's going to be issued, will that permit be issued, what is going to be considered? Is that going to be a detriment to investing in a new facility that often costs significant amounts of money? And so the Recycling Technology Innovation Act would define and essentially regulate advanced recycling as manufacturing, which is what it is. There are about 25 states in the union that already do this. That also happens to be the states where advanced recycling is growing. And so we'd like to see this as a federal policy. We really thank Dan Crenshaw, Congressman from Texas, for taking the lead on this and introducing that bill. The other bill that is actually kind of the other side of this equation that really was just introduced this past week is something called the Recycling Materials Attribution Act, the RMAA. That was introduced by a bipartisan duo, Nick Langworthy from New York and Congressman Jonathan Jackson from Illinois. And what that would do is, once the material is recycled, it would set marketing standards so that when brands actually want to use materials coming from all kinds of different kinds of recycling, they actually get credit for it, right? It counts as recycled content. So on the one hand, you have the standards that will allow for the building and the modernizing of infrastructure. On the other hand, you're basically giving the brand the peace of mind that if they actually buy this stuff, it will count towards being recycled content.
Okay, that was clear. You're also encouraging continued engagement in the Global Plastics Treaty. Now, here at Plastics Today, we have covered that over the last few years, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the treaty at this point is a dead letter. Do you think it could be revived, and what's in it for the U.S. plastics industry at this point from your perspective?
Well, the good news is, and again, maybe I'm just glass half full here, but I think we were a long way from even being on life support. I mean, this thing is actually very much alive. I think, first of all, we saw the election of a new chair, which I think is a very positive sign. The fact that they did it as part of essentially keeping the last session open is also a really positive sign. And just having been there a number of times, I know you were there a few times. I mean, it's a lot. Multilateral negotiations are complicated. There's a lot of different factors in play. It's very different than the way we make policy here in the United States. But at the same time, they're closer than I think people give them credit for. The treaty text itself, was about 31 titles, and really there's only about 3 or 4 of them that are areas of significant disagreement. Now they happen to be big areas of disagreement, and we hope countries will get together and bridge that gap. We in the industry, in the global plastics industry, and certainly in the U.S. plastics industry, would like to see a final agreement reached. We still very much support the idea of global rules, global framework, global agreement on plastic pollution. We think it should focus on pollution, not necessarily on production, because that really is where you're going to make the biggest difference here. And it is the landing zone, in our view, where all countries can reach agreement here. Japan has recently announced that they're going to start some informal, they call them informal talks in UN parlance over the next few months. We really, really support that. That's a great idea. One of the things that keeps happening at the past few UN treaty negotiations is nothing happens in between one and the other, and then everybody comes back and everybody just kind of goes back to their corners and doesn't change. And so if we were to do that again in a year or whenever the next one is without anything happening in between, I think we run the risk of failure again. However, the fact that countries are getting together and trying to reach some consensus, trying to bridge some of these gaps, trying to talk is a healthy thing and can only be positive towards getting to what we hope is a final agreement at the next set of negotiations.
Well, I hope so too. It's been a long road, but we'll see. Lastly, the third pillar, I guess you could call it, is the Plastic Health Research Act, which warrants the president's attention, according to you. Can you tell us more about that and what it hopes to achieve?
Yeah, so the Plastics Health Research Act is a bipartisan bill introduced by Congresswoman Haley Stevens from Michigan and Congressman Frank Lucas from Oklahoma. So bipartisan duo on the House Science Committee. And it deals with microplastics primarily, an area of significant sort of new concern, new research, new policy. And it's an area that the science is still very much in development. We saw over the past few weeks some articles from The Guardian and other places where scientists were questioning the validity of the actual science being done on microplastics. And it's something that our scientists have flagged for a number of months now, which is there really are not common standards for how you do the research on microplastics. And so as a result, because this is such a new and emerging area of research, a lot of the science that's being done isn't terribly definitive. And so the news headlines that say, there's this much microplastics in this body part may not always be what the actual study said. And there's significant uncertainty and sort of methodology that needed to be corrected. That is all correctable, and it really would take a lot more attention, a lot more science, a lot more research to actually make it happen. That's where the Plastics Health Research Act comes in. It would take the full force of the government and essentially say, okay, all of the science agencies of the government, whether it's HHS, EPA, NIST, OSTP, and basically say, you all coordinate, you all bring essentially the force of the government into this issue and help figure out what's real here, right? Like, let's actually get a sense of what the detection level is, what the risks are, what the exposures are. And then from that, we can make some reliable decisions about whether or not there's more regulation that's needed. If there is, that's fine, right? We're not an industry that necessarily has a problem with regulation, but we do think it needs to be science-based regulation. And presently, the science isn't very good on microplastics. So what we hope through this bill, through the Plastics Health Research Act, is that we can actually start to modernize that science and to supercharge that science and make it better and higher quality so that we can make good, sound decisions based on that.
Very good. That's all I had for you. Are there any other suggestions you have for the president? The speech is, I think, on the 24th, February 24th,
Yeah.
unless, there's a last minute change.
Yeah, I mean, just so, and again, he's got a lot he's got to talk about. I don't think it'll be surprised if he doesn't dig deeply into plastics. Obviously, we hope that he does, but he's a president that cares deeply about manufacturing, and we are a manufacturing sector that matters deeply to this country. We generate 670,000 jobs, direct jobs, another 3 million total when you sort of look across the economy, and we're a big economic driver here. One of the nice things about the policies that we are asking for more attention on is that they will drive even more economic growth here. It's counter, when we talk about recycling, we're all often talking about the environmental benefits of recycling. But the reality of it is, if you start scaling up recycling in the United States using some of these bills that we're highlighting today, you can actually get economic benefits out of it and real economic benefits out of that. Our economic department actually put out a study a few months ago that said if you just took 50% of the plastics that was going to landfills and you recycled it instead, you would create 173,000 jobs nationwide. That's roughly the size of the milk industry and basically, generating it from scratch. I'm not going to promise you that if you do those two bills, you'll all of a sudden get those numbers. But man, there's so much potential here. And that is why, as a manufacturing sector, you don't always think about recycling. But we think about it as a manufacturing sector, and it's one that can really provide significant job growth and economic boost for this country.
Great. Well, I hope President Trump is listening. You never know. And we'll find out how much advice he takes up. Thank you so much, Ross. I appreciate your time. And to all the viewers out there, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.